Ed Calderon, what's going on?
Uh, I'm apparently on a podcast with you right now, and the world's a giant dumpster fire of a place at the moment. But
You better believe it. You better believe it. And I want to start with this, Ed, right? First of all, myself and yourself were just talking before we go into who you are and all of that. You
yeah,
were just saying to me there's a big connection between Mexico and Ireland that not many people know, and I didn't know it.
uh, there's a bunch of redheaded people that live in the hills, and every now and then you'll encounter communities of just interesting white people with green eyes with interesting Irish last names and stuff like that. All it's random, but you'll find them all over Mexico. Uh, there was a whole battalion, the San Patrick's, the El Batallón de San Patricio, the San Patrick's
Yeah.
Battalion, that was fighting for the Americans during the last Mexico-American War. That basically flipped sides and joined the Mexican army, joined the Mexican army during that conflict. Though, the Americans are not they're not pretty keen on that specific part of the
No.
history, but Mexicans are. Like, it's
Yeah.
a big source of pride and kind of an honor to meet people from Ireland that
Really?
don't know about some of this history, and they don't realize that there's monuments to this Irish battalion in Mexico, and it's celebrated, right. St. Patrick's Day to us is a celebration of that battalion and how they basically decided to join the underdogs in that fight. You know,
That's crazy.
uh,
That's crazy. You learn something new every day, eh?
yeah. Well, I mean, realistically, if you think about it, Irish and Mexicans, the whole Catholic connection,
Yeah, for sure.
the whole ultra violence, all that.
Yeah, for sure. And okay, Ed, do you want to start off for people who don't know who Ed Calderon is? I'm sure a lot of people know who you are, but for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a brief introduction and just explain a little bit of a background of who you are and what you do, please?
Sure. I grew up in Tijuana, Mexico, the legendary city, border city. A few of you might know it from its mentions in The Simpsons and popular culture and stuff like that. Donkey shows and all. That's my city. I was born there and grew up there. Um, Decided to go into medicine, study medicine, and this was during the 9/11 era. And the economy went in the toilet, and I was looking for options. One
Mhm.
of the only options I found was a newspaper ad saying that they needed young, unmarried men for a certain government program, a very experimental police force that they were trying to set up in Mexico, Americanized in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I signed up. Uh, I thought I was going to be like an analyst or something. I thought I was going to be in a room with computer boards and stuff like that. I don't know. Like, I don't know what I thought it was going to be, and all of a sudden I was being clean shaven by a bunch of Mexican uh, Army SF guys in a refurbished prison that was now a police academy, right?
Just,
uh, I did 12 years of counter narcotics operations all over the border in Mexico. Just to be clear, I'm a Mexican. I'm not American. I have
sure.
very clear English because I grew up on the border. So I worked for the Mexican government and did 12 years of that.
Yeah.
Counter narcotics, counter kidnapping, uh, all operations, burning fields of whatever we found. That's the type of stuff I did.
Yeah.
I also worked with a few high level officials as a head bodyguard for a few governors and a few high level officials.
Yeah.
And until it ended, 12 years in. It became unsustainable to stay inside for a lot of reasons, and I had to look for another job.
Sure.
Opportunity brought me to the United States. I immigrated there 3 years ago, and found myself being wanted or sought out for my experience as an instructor,
Yeah.
which I didn't think was I didn't think was a viable thing to share my experience or to train people through my experience. and start doing traveler safety classes with people that would move in dangerous places, like Doctors Without Borders, war correspondents.
Mhm.
Those types of people started kind of providing some of the experiences that I got from working against the cartels.
Yeah.
um, Into that kind of led me to just be like a sought after guy when it came to trying to figure out how to smuggle things into countries, how to work against cartels, or how to keep yourself safe
Yeah. Yeah.
and armed in weird places out there in the world that you might find yourself in.
Yeah.
That's been kind of my journey to become
Yeah.
that guy. And along the way, a few people heard my story. A few people went to some of the classes, and I ended up in the public eye in a big manner. Later on.
Absolutely, yeah, and I mean, in terms of, I've seen you on Joe Rogan obviously twice, and super interesting. And it's funny because I think a lot of people, whether you're in the US or in Europe or wherever, and I think people are kind of engrossed with the whole cartel situation in Mexico, because it obviously transferred from what happened in Colombia in the 70s and 80s and early 90s with Pablo Escobar, and then obviously all of that violence has it was stemmed in Colombia, but then it was kind of transferred up to Mexico. And then I suppose one of the reasons I think it's a good time to have you on this show is because last year in 2020 it was the most violent year ever in Mexican history. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, it's the most lethal year to be a Mexican in history.
Yeah,
Since numbers were kept, and we're on our way this year to meet that. And it's insane, even with an epidemic going on,
yeah,
even with COVID shutdowns all over Mexico, and traffic and people moving about kind of at a standstill. We still managed to break the record for people getting murdered, and that's so people also know those murder rate numbers are official numbers from the Mexican government, which are, I used to work for the Mexican government. They're not to be trusted
yeah, yeah.
specifically, so they might be a little under what they should be,
Okay.
and they also don't take into account people that just went missing,
Yeah, which are probably dead, right?
which are probably dead unless there's a giant prison that nobody's aware of that has more than, I don't know, 100,000 people in it. But people go missing at an industrial level in Mexico.
Yeah,
Your body disposal is something that is done in Mexico at an industrial level. It's not uncommon to find caustic acid baths in places that shouldn't have them.
yeah.
No place
And,
should have
and,
them.
and, 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 and and that's from as well. It's from I was listening to you speaking on another show, and you were talking about, like, okay, obviously you have some of the Mexican politicians, they kind of get on the media and they start giving out about how Mexicans are treated when they're trying to illegally enter the United States. But you were speaking about the the other people coming from other countries in Central America, and when they
Yeah,
come into Mexico, and you were saying that there's been some serious atrocities there
yeah.
with people being raped, murdered, and mass graves and whatever. That's fucked.
It's it's not uncommon to find mass executions of immigrants in Mexico. It's not uncommon at all. There's a historical route that goes from Mexico's southern border all the way up to Texas. It's train related,
Yeah,
and it's basically people ride those trains like old hobo lifestyle from the from the past, but people are doing it now. Except that women are being raped, children are being raped along the way, and then
Jesus.
people just go missing, right? People go missing. People are taken in as enforced servitude for some cartel groups out there to work in fields and or work as here's a gun, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, it's insanely hypocritical sometimes when I hear Mexican government talk about human rights violations on the border, on its border, when it does its treatment of immigrants is something to kind of not applaud. As far as the country, Mexico is not a good place to be an immigrant, to go
No.
through immigrant. But it's yes, it's very interesting to see how how depending on who's in office in Mexico, that it becomes a point of pointing fingers towards either the past administration's mistakes. That's they always blame them,
Mm,
or it's the Americans' mistake. But it's
yeah,
it's never some of our shit that we need to
I
worry
got
about.
you. I got you. And Ed, I've got to ask you, why is like why was and I'm just thinking out loud here. Why was 2020 the most violent year in American history? Because I would have thought, okay, you've got the whole COVID-19 pandemic, and from what I've read, that's had a serious impact on drugs entering, because obviously you've got less people traveling, and that's so you've got less people crossing borders. So from what I heard, the say for instance, the price of cocaine has skyrocketed in places like New York and Los Angeles, because now whether that's the cartels actually doing that and controlling the prices themselves, I don't know. But from what I heard, it's due to a lack of getting the drugs through. And even just using that as an example, I'm literally just after listening to the radio there over here in Ireland, and apparently in Antwerp, uh, just now there's been the largest ever cocaine seizure in Europe for 23 tons of cocaine.
And that's probably just one of a few that, and that's the one that got caught basically.
Yeah, yeah,
So uh, you would think that during an epidemic, and an epidemic like the one we're going through, and you might think whatever you want about it, but people were afraid. People did stop doing what they were doing. Governments did shut down.
yeah,
Businesses did shut down. You would think that that would slow the violence of the kind that we see in Mexico, but didn't happen.
yeah,
A few factors as far as why that didn't slow down anything down in Mexico. One of them is something I mentioned for the first time I was ever on a large podcast like Rogan, and when I mentioned that, I got a lot of weird, conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat shit thrown at me. And I've stated the connection between the New Generation Cartel, which is a big, giant cartel currently growing in Mexico. Mexico is formed by many small groups of
yeah,
cartels. It's not just a single big one. It's several cartels controlling their interests, and then they ally themselves. Some of them are basically like cartel group mercenaries that hire themselves out to other people, to other larger groups. Um, but mostly, it's a giant cartel called the Sinaloa cartel that is the longest lasting, longest living cartel
yeah.
that has inroads into places to the East Coast, from to the West Coast to the East Coast, into the United States. It's the cartel that El Chapo Guzman used to belong to. He never ran it though, although the U.S. government made it seem like that. And
I heard
some of
that
the
there's someone else that's meant to be the guy
yeah,
who
yeah,
was the main guy, and El Chapo was just given the kind of media
yeah.
kind of you're the head.
Yeah, you're the head. It's not just the media. I mean, the U.S. government and all of its knowledge and wisdom said that he replaced Bin Laden on the America's Most
Yeah,
Wanted list as their most wanted criminal, having even though he was not the head of the Sinaloa cartel. No, the
yeah,
head of the Sinaloa cartel has never been on top of. I mean, was never on top of that list. El Chapo was arrested and all that. His name is El Mayo Zambada. That who he has been historically the guy that has run that cartel since the 80s. But this notion of leadership and who's in charge of it, it's always been kind of blurry on the U.S. side, and it makes people kind of like suspect, like why isn't he never mentioned? Why isn't this guy ever kind of put on top of the list? And why do people why are government efforts consistently made or shifted towards other people and not who's truly in charge? Which makes a lot of people think that he might be a U.S. asset of some sort.
Well,
That's
yeah, well, in terms of that, there is a little bit of history there for people who've seen Narcos, the latest series, and in terms of what happened to what was the DEA agent
Kiki
Kiki
Camarena.
Camareno, yeah, yeah,
So just so people know, like that all that shit that shows up on the narco shows are things that were common knowledge when I was going through my training. We learned about it. We learned about CIA. stuff going on in the region related to the Contra situation.
Yeah.
So supposedly a CIA agent discovered some shady shit going on, and he was picked up, and one of the people involved in his torture and murder was a member of the CIA apparently. And I'm not the one that go for details. I was actually on a podcast with a guy that did a show related to it. But that's before my time. But CIA being involved in stuff in Mexico is it's we had a president that was on the CIA's payroll, during one of the during in the 60s. So not uncommon.
Going right. Sorry to cut across you there, but that's even going back, or even before the whole Mexican situation, going back to when Barry Seal got killed by the Medellin cartel. You're going right back there. That weren't the CIA were in bed with Noriega, and it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, but well now, and also you see the interesting thing you see. So let's say we're Alex Jones territory, fucking tinfoil
Yeah.
hat shit. I'm always called that when I talk about some of these things, and then later on, New York Times is doing an expose on how the Chinese are laundering money for the cartels, and that's like a big, oh, nobody knew about that. Yeah, a lot of people talked about it, but whatever. Um, you have this giant cartel called the Sinaloa cartel, who is a historical cartel that has had historical control over most of the border region, and leadership within it that never gets specifically targeted by the US. So you think, you know what, they might be an asset to the United States in some way, shape, or form.
Hmm.
That's not unheard of. So why the instability? If you have somebody you're betting on, why the instability? Well, there's somebody that isn't loyal to the United States, CIA interest, maybe, I don't know, or an independent group growing in power down in Mexico, and that is the New Generation Cartel. New Generation Cartel was the only cartel that not only grew during the COVID epidemic, but it also increased its output of fentanyl and fentanyl laced heroin, and just basically all of its cash crop products that go into the United States. All of them grew,
Hmm.
and the only reason that is because they kept control of the ports in Mexico on the Pacific side of the ocean, and all of those ports are notorious for receiving massive amounts of shipments from China that never stopped even during COVID. So that leads the people that are more in the conspiratorial theorists out there in the world to think that maybe Chinese state has a vested interest in a single cartel in Mexico. So the violence you're seeing out there is a proxy war in a way,
That's
as
fucking
far as
crazy.
units go.
Because one of the points that you're after bringing up there, and you're after bringing me onto it nicely, was China's involvement, and this is a relatively new phenomenon, where in my, well, to the best of my knowledge anyway, correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of, I know that Mexico is resource rich in lithium, isn't it? Or
Yeah.
is it lithium? Yeah, and or sorry, iron, iron as well. That basically China were coming in, and that they were mining for iron, and explain that whole dynamic there, because there was something else with one of the some Chinese businessman slash drug dealer was caught with an obscene amount of money a few years ago, I remember, and I was like, what the fuck?
So a few weird things happened with Chinese interest involved. There was a documentary on Netflix about vigilante groups popping up in Mexico. I don't know if
Yeah.
people remember that. Cartel Land, I think it was called, or something. And they were painted as these heroic armed groups standing up to the cartels, when in actuality they were cartel members themselves, just basically putting the T-shirt on of a defense force. And there are reports, wide reports all over the place of them actually being hired on as security in places where the Chinese were illegally mining ore out of the
Or
region.
that was it. Sorry, that was it. That was it.
So that's I've heard stuff like that in the air that happened in the area. So it's interesting seeing some of these localized conflicts and how there's always something related to resources that are outside of drugs and outside of what most people would pay attention to, basically.
Mm,
I'm sure most people have not even thought about illegally mining ore out of a region, right?
mm.
It's not, but you'll see a weed grow out there, and you'll be like, oh my god, look at all that weed, look at all that poisonous weed. But somebody mining ore, nobody bats an eye. Um, you move to places like Sonora, where the Mormon family was massacred, and finding out that underneath that area is 70 something percent of the world's mineable lithium, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's interesting. Realizing that you know there's a bunch of Chinese citizens living in Mexico with a bunch of permits that somehow they got
yeah, yeah.
to 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 bring in obscene amounts of fentanyl and methamphetamines and a bunch of substances that should be controlled and regulated through regular ports of inspection from China into Mexico. And the guy that is receiving them keeps all of his money in his house and gets raided by the Mexican government with $100 million, I think, or
Jesus
over
Christ.
$100 million.
In
And
cash, right?
in cash.
Jesus Christ.
It was stacked to about
Waist height, wasn't it? It showed
probably
Jesus Christ.
uh yeah, everybody was naked when they went into that room to count. Um but it was you see stuff like that happen in plain view of a lot of people. And there's no way that those substances are moving out of China without Chinese state knowing about them. I'd say.
Yeah.
I mean, what
So, so,
happens in
sorry to interrupt you, but so what you're implying there, and this was something I was going to ask you, you think that it's basically the Chinese state have, a, I suppose, a tie-in with one of or multiple Mexican drug cartels.
yeah, yeah. I mean, so the big story broke recently about Chinese money men basically being the money launderers of choice for cartels, and this has always been the case. So it's pretty fascinating that broke national news. Um, so once money goes into the Chinese banking system, guess who can't see any of it?
Yeah,
The U.S.
yeah, yeah. I got
Right. So Chinese banking apps, Chinese banks. If I'm a cartel guy and I have $100,000, I'll give it to a Chinese businessman who will deposit it into his Chinese banking app. It'll go into the Chinese banking system, and he will transfer money into another business of the same nature in Mexico. The businessman will take the money and convert it to pesos and give it to the cartel guys, and poof, clean money,
money's
right?
laundered. Yeah,
Burner phones. All you need is burner phones, and people in China that people from Chinese nationals that have Chinese banking interest and in the U.S. and in China and or in Canada as well, and the money gets moved around, right?
gotcha.
So so again, that type of fuckery can't happen in China without the Chinese knowing about it.
Oh,
I'd
no,
say.
especially in somewhere like China where the government, you're not even allowed to go on WhatsApp over in China.
No, so it's fascinating seeing some of that shit slide. It is what it is. So you would think maybe China has a vested interest in allowing some of that fuckery to go on, or they use the Chinese triads in Hong Kong to beat up the Hong Kong
Yeah,
protesters,
yeah, yeah.
right? So sometimes I get people saying, well, there's criminal groups in China that work under the radar, and then they do this, they do that. It's like I don't think that's how it works in China. There's no under the radar out there. There's just being used or working for. I
Yeah,
mean, how it's 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 all of the fentanyl feeding the US's hunger for it either comes from China
yeah,
or is put into drugs that are grown in Mexico by people that get them from China and or are being taught how to make it in Mexico by Chinese chemists.
Yeah.
So imagine if they weren't making that, they were making a poison that would kill somebody if they got it in the U.S. And that would be a terrorist attack, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's not. But it's not. It's something that's slowly fucking people up that purposely put it into their bodies.
Jesus.
I don't know.
So
To
so
me,
so
it's
so so we're talking that there's potentially the level of corruption that we're talking about goes from the Chinese government involving obviously criminal enterprises like the triads over there, and then that goes over to Mexico, where that's probably involving the Mexican government and the Mexican drug cartels. And let's be honest, no Chinese cartel is going to go over and start operating in Mexico carte blanche
no.
without getting significant permission, or else there'd be a lot of dead Chinamen in Mexico.
Yeah. A smart invading force will always use by locals, by proxy.
Yeah,
So I think I mean, it's not an invading force. I'm not calling the Chinese an invading force.
sure, yeah,
Uh, they do want to, they are the enemies of the United States in a lot of ways, and they're rivals, and they have different rules that they work on under.
uh-huh.
Interesting thing happened when Trump got elected. Uh, Trump got elected, and came into power, and he decided to pressure a lot of American business ventures in Mexico back to move their operations back to the United States.
Yeah,
And it was viewed as something punitive he was doing, or at least that's how he wanted to portray it. Something punitive to the Mexicans because you know Bush era, the Muslims were the bad guys, and probably the Trump era, the Mexicans were the bad guys.
yeah,
That was like
yeah,
the mindset that Mexicans had about Trump in a lot of ways was that. And he extracts all these businesses. A lot of businesses move out of Mexico and go into the United States, and Mexico doesn't feel it. It didn't feel a sudden downturn on its economy and stuff like that because the Chinese business interests just basically just
yeah, yeah,
swooped in, right? And again, that national story breaking out about basically how cartels use Chinese businesses to launder money in and out of the United States and down to Mexico, and how there a lot of the fentanyl is coming from over there, and how some of these weird bogus pain medication machines that they're using to fabricate are now coming out of China. Um, that I mean, scary shit. Now, you know, I mean, we can put all these pieces together. You know.
yeah, 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 for sure. It's crazy. It's crazy. And what I wanted to ask you, kind of on that topic, was okay. So you're obviously a legal immigrant gone into the US. You've gone in. You've gone in the right way. But I've heard you speaking in the past, and I'm not going to say that you're a Trump fan because I don't want to put words in your mouth. But I suppose what I wanted to get your perspective as a Mexican who's gone about going into the US the correct way.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask your perspective on, okay, so as you said, Trump kind of took out this kind of war on Mexico where he was building the wall, and he kind of made out, okay, the US is Mexico's dumping ground for their criminals and for basically the undercurrent of society that Mexico didn't want.
Yes.
Oh,
Send us their rapists, their murderers, and
yeah, yeah,
no, my political views are on the conservative side. Most Mexicans are, we're Catholic mostly. Most of us are Catholic, and we
uh-huh,
have that political view. So I'm pro-gun. I'm
yeah,
also pro. These are my political views. I want to carry a gun to my gay best friend's wedding and smoke a joint with him, and not being pestered by anybody.
yeah, yeah,
That's what that I would enjoy that.
yeah. There you go. Yeah,
Trump came in and he did what he did, and Mexicans were the bad guys, and some of the trolling he did was pretty admirable, and applauded it. Some of the people he pissed off were people that I don't agree with a lot. So, but he said some horrible shit. He did, he did some horrible shit, and I can't vote in the United States till I'm a full citizen, so
Mhm.
I couldn't vote for him. It made my immigration process longer and made for a lot of headaches. Uh, so as far as me being a fan of his, no, not really.
Oh,
I
yeah,
was mostly a mostly a spectator that applauded that did a few slow claps to some of his fuckery.
yeah,
Um, but and again, politically inclined more. I like small government. The Constitution is pretty great. I like having the ability to defend myself. And I think the government shouldn't say anything about me smoking a joint. That's pretty much it. And yeah, and as far as so I came in with that in the environment as that was my first 3 years. My first my first 3 years in the U.S. was
yeah,
going through that. Trump was elected. My process was prolonged. I was questioned more deeply as far as who I was. Um, there was more of a free reign to question people about their ethnicity or where they're from.
yeah,
Uh, there was a lot of negative connotations to Mexico and the wall and shithole countries and all of this rhetoric which is pretty fucking hurtful.
yeah,
Uh, it was a fucking horrible time. It's a
yeah.
horrible time to kind of go through it.
What,
But
what,
in a
what,
lot of ways,
was there any element of, I suppose this is the problem with people like Trump and people like him, that kind of, that he kind of says things which there's half elements of truth to, and then people go, look, I told you that this is what happened or whatever. But in terms of, like, the people coming in, obviously there's a lot of good people coming into the United States from Mexico, and an awful lot of the illegal immigrants going in there aren't criminals and want to go in there and are going in there for a better life and that kind
uh,
of thing.
straight off the bat, and just this is me being completely real with you guys. The United States would shut down immediately if there were no illegal immigrants in the United States.
Yeah,
That's and if anybody thinks I'm bullshitting or lying, walk into any kitchen,
yeah,
high level kitchen in any fucking restaurant, 5-star restaurant in the United States.
yeah,
Van a estar hablando español en la pinche cocina.
yeah,
Speaking Spanish in that kitchen.
yeah, yeah,
Service industries all over the country. Um, During COVID, there was no shortages of salads on the shelves in supermarkets,
yeah,
and that's because illegal immigrants are essential workers during COVID
yeah,
in
yeah,
the United States. Just
yeah.
think about that.
No, for
Illegal
sure.
are essential workers in
Yeah,
the U.S.
yeah,
So any sort of fucking rhetoric that I see as far as specifically targeting Mexicans trying to steal jobs from Americans, uh, or illegal immigrants coming into the country as a whole just being a negative is I there's a problem with that
yeah,
thought process. On the other hand, there is a giant industry around illegal immigration that is horrific, that eats people, that is involved in sex trafficking and
mhm,
trafficking of children and other horrible things.
yeah. Narcotics and kidnapping and that kind of, yeah,
And it's interesting seeing a country so divided that I'm a part of now on race issues. You know, exacerbated by the COVID epidemic, but very divided on race issues. Um, and a culture that hasn't really reconciled with its past slavery, enslavement of a whole group of or ethnic group within it, that now lives completely, oblivious to the fact that they do have slaves in there's current slavery in the United States.
yeah, yeah. Well,
You go out in some of those fields, and there's some people actually working off the debts that they have to the people that crossed them illegally across the border,
Jesus.
or they're working off to pay for somebody else in their family to get crossed into the United States.
Or people, like, if you look, I was listening to some fairly interesting statistic the other day. Okay, this isn't related to people coming from Mexico, but there's more black people imprisoned now in the United States than there was at the height of slavery. Like the home of the free, right?
the, the schizophrenia that goes on, like when you see some of the thought process. So
Yeah,
it completely just to think about it. On one side, the the whole illegal immigrants are bad. They're coming here to steal our jobs, rapists, murderers, and all that stuff. Yet, aisles are stocked with vegetables. Things are still cranking out. Products are still being produced and stuff like
mm,
that. And basically, the same people are enjoying the benefits of having an illegal immigrant population doing cheap labor in places where they don't want to do their labor.
yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Illegal immigrants making first batches of COVID masks or just cloth masks during the start of the thing. So essential workers, making things in America.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy.
It's insane. On one hand, you get that whole illegal immigrants are bad; they're taking our jobs, but also they do the jobs that we don't want to do,
For
and
sure.
also and also illegal immigrants are essential workers, and we demand that our salad is going to be on the aisles. On one hand, right? But
Yeah,
on the other hand, you have the other side of the political spectrum saying we should, illegal immigration is fine, open borders. Let's figure out how to abolish ICE and all this stuff. And meanwhile, people are making very bad people, criminals are making shit ton of money
yeah,
from crossing people illegally across that border.
yeah,
Sometimes those people are carrying loads of fentanyl laced heroin with them
yeah,
when they cross. So they're drug mules as well. And some of those loads will go on to kill more people of this generation with some of that horrible poison that
yeah,
they go put into their veins. So who's right or who's wrong on the political on the politics and on the arguments as far as pro illegal immigration of all kinds, or against illegal immigration. We're good with some immigration but not all immigration, yet we thrive in an economy that is sustained by illegal immigration.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
But
I
even coming out with like the argument of legalizing drugs, and you're seeing obviously cannabis, like you mentioned, you smoke weed and whatever, and you're seeing that cannabis is becoming legalized in lots of states now across the United States. And I'd imagine within the next 10 years, Ed, I'd imagine you're going to start seeing this rolled out throughout the world, because it's the biggest load of bullshit anyway, that like
well
go on.
yeah, so speaking completely as a you know uh, it's weird to say this, but like as a few friends of mine who are in the US military just jokingly made me a veteran hat, like one of
Yeah,
those hats that have
yeah,
your place where you fought basically. And all of them would wear like Iraq or enduring freedom veteran and all this, all these things. And I would look at them and kind of laugh. Most of my friends when I was going through the immigration process were veteran community guys, and they made me one that said drug war veteran, and had and I have a patch here. Hold on, I think. Uh, made me a
oh yeah, I see it. Yeah. Drug war veteran, love it.
they made it as a joke, but I destroyed a shit ton of fields of weed as my part of my job. I put poison into the ground to keep it from coming back up.
And it just keeps, but it keeps growing. Weed grows back over and over. And what are you actually winning when you're doing it?
Uh, Again, this was a job that I had. I burned a lot of it. I chased people that had it. I arrested people that were transporting it. And I did all this, lost friends, shootouts
Yeah,
related to loads of marijuana and or guarding marijuana fields. I've lost friends to it, getting shot, just and then kids getting shot that were guarding them by the army and all this
yeah.
bloodshed around it. And then my job ends, and I find myself in a dispensary in Denver, Colorado, eating a cookie that made me feel kind of funny. And the lady that sold it was a nice, she was a nice lady. It's
Yeah,
just a nice dispensary in a nice part of Denver, Colorado.
yeah,
It's the mind fuckery. I mean, it's mind blowing going from fighting it, prosecuting it, being told that it's the devil,
yeah.
and all of a sudden I'm just eating a gummy bear and it's fine. It's
For,
fine.
for sure,
It's
because like
fine.
it's funny you should say that, because I had the American footballer Ricky Williams. I had him on last week, and obviously he's a big cannabis connoisseur, shall we say? And Ricky was saying, like when he grew up, and it was like two different Americas, because he was at home with his stepdad and his mother, and like they'd smoke joints in the evening, and they did it as a way of unwinding or whatever. And then he'd go into school, and like that was the norm at home. And then he'd go into school, and it's like the war on drugs.
Yeah.
Smoking weed is so bad; it's gonna kill you. And fucking, you're gonna use it. What?
The gateway drug.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's mind blowing. A few things that didn't happen when they started legalizing it. A lot of people thought that legalizing weed was going to basically cut into giant profits from the cartels, and it was going to
yeah.
hurt them economically. The cartels are growing illegal weed in state lands in California and Washington State
Where it's
for
legal.
free.
And are they doing that to undercut the dispensaries, or what way are they doing that?
Yeah, they're doing it like that. Just take that skanky ass weed with a bunch of chemicals in it. You don't know what they put in there,
Yeah,
and package it in some little bougie bag, and nobody's the wiser.
Jesus
And it
Christ.
gets yeah. So that didn't happen. A lot of the weed production resources in Mexico then turned to heroin and heroin production. So it basically made one problem a bit worse in a lot of ways. Uh, you know, a lot of people talk about full legalization. I don't think full legalization is the path. But you know, I mean, I don't know specifically weed, like things like weed.
Yeah,
Th-
it's a
things
no-brainer.
things like mushrooms.
Yeah,
Like mushrooms really are not. I remember them being insanely mushrooms, LSD, mushrooms, heroin, all that belong in the same little category for people, and seeing how some of that stuff is just completely life changing to people that struggle with PTSD,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
traumatic brain injury, and just seeing how some of that shit being demonized doesn't even make sense, and all the lives that are lost,
yeah,
all the lives that were lost just on marijuana in Mexico.
yeah, yeah,
It's unfathomable to people. It's a plant that makes you want crave M&Ms and chills you out, and that led to I don't know, maybe millions of deaths
yeah.
just to prosecute that specific thing. Um,
Versus alcohol, where it's the good old taxable drug, alcohol, and you've got motherfuckers are going killing their, like, think about all the domestic violence incidents where somebody's lost their life over alcohol, or two guys fighting at home and somebody gets stabbed or somebody gets shot. How many fucking times has that happened? How many times has that happened with weed? Come on.
No, I mean, you might stab yourself with a knife trying to open up a bag of Doritos. That's
Yeah.
about it, right? That's about the amount of violence that happens. Uh, Mexico just legalized, just just passed legislation to legalize marijuana in, like, as far as nationally, right? And a lot of people are screaming victory. That's gonna teach the cartels that they
Yeah.
got them. But the problem is that most of the places where you can grow it are cartel controlled.
Jesus.
There's no way you can set up a giant dispensary without being ripped off by a group of 40, 70 men armed with AKs anywhere in the country. So
Yeah.
it means that most of these fields that are going to be operating openly are probably going to be cartel owned or sponsored, or are going to be paying for protection to the cartels. So in a way,
Yeah.
business as usual when
Yeah.
it comes to weed. And
And
if you are a private citizen, you can't own more than 6 plants or
yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't make sense. Changing gears a little bit. So doing the job that you do, that you've been doing for the last 15 years, have you ever come into the crosshairs of the cartels where your own life has been threatened, or whether, yeah, explain to me about that, because sorry to just come on, but because I've heard when you were working in the security service over in the or in law enforcement over in Mexico, sorry, that you're going to be working with guys and probably colleagues of yours that you're shaking hands with. You know they're on the books of the cartels, and you've got to act dumb and go like, "Hey, yeah, enjoy work," you know.
You have this. We have this meme out there about this. You know, a true friend will act blind when he sees you with a chick out there that isn't,
Uh-huh.
isn't like a side chick. You
Yeah,
know that whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Stupid ass meme, and a horrible one. But you know, that was the attitude you had to keep about yourself. You
yeah.
would walk into a room with the head of the head of police of the district, and you knew everything you said was going to be reported back to some of the guys you were after.
Jesus.
So
You've got to watch what you say then, right?
you got to watch what you say. You got to watch who you hang out with. You have to watch who you trust, and the whole you give them all the rope they want to hang, and they're going to hang themselves with it. Basically,
Mhm.
you give them all the information that you give them all the false information you want, and figure out the rest. It was nobody. So in parts of Mexico, the municipal police is working for one cartel, the state police is working for another, the army might be protecting interests for another one, and it's a clusterfuck. There's nobody you can trust, right?
Yeah.
Going through some of it and being inside, you would find out that people were, that guy, stay away from that guy. That guy works for those guys, and this unit you're in, this group, this operations group you're in, we're just going to stick to our own shit, and we're going to go through our own security protocols, our own polygraph examinations, our own background checks, and everybody here is on everybody here did it, so we're all to be trusted. Yes, no, okay. And as long as we all went through it, we were cool with the people that work within. But anybody on the outside, that it
You
was
just got to
hard.
be careful. Yeah, yeah.
And people would turn. You would have somebody that went through all the background checks, polygraph examinations, house visits, financials, FBI background check on the U.S. side, and all of a sudden they were caught. They were caught.
Money. But you see, obviously, money is the great corrupter. And when you're talking about the amount of money that these cartels have,
Yeah, here's $200,000 for you to just do this.
yeah, 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 yeah. Fuck.
Uh, a lot of people went that way. The problem with going that way is once you do it once, you're tagged and or identified as working for somebody,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's a death sentence. It's not a it's not a longevity thing
So,
there.
does, like let's say for instance you're doing your job and you take a bribe, from, let's say it's the next generation cartel, okay, and let's say you take the 200,000 to look the other way. Does that make you a target for the Sinaloa cartel? Are you on the other team then? Yeah.
Yeah, you just put a hat on. And if they pick up somebody out there on the street and they fucking torture the fucker and he says, "Tell us who's working for you guys," and they're, "Oh, we have this guy and this guy there." Okay, and then that's who they go after.
Jesus
So
Christ.
it's a back and forth. It's not there's no way you can. It's not a long lived thing to do, and it's horrible. And it's
No, it's,
uh, and then it was legit just walking through a shooting gallery. I remember somebody walking behind me on one of the first jobs I did, and knocking my back plate, my ballistic plate on my vest, and saying, "Yeah, this one's important too, because you could be shot in the back here." And I looked at the fucker. I was like, "You're probably never going to be behind me ever again, right?" During one of these. But yes, getting constantly reminded that don't trust anybody as far as you can throw them. You can be shot in the back. They want you.
by your colleagues he was employing.
Yeah, yeah. Like you wouldn't. I mean, legit.
Fuck.
Shit could happen out there.
Yeah.
People could be not trusted. It was not uncommon for cartel guys to dress up as army men or clone uniforms, operations group uniforms, or
Yeah. Yeah.
you go there. There was a famous shootout in a place in Tijuana called Cúpula. It's
Mm.
basically a giant castle type building that they had there, made of brick with a big dome on top of it. Perfect shooting platform for anybody that's into shooting.
Yeah.
High rise with a dome and basically like a mosque setup, castle setup.
Okay.
Um, the army arrived there. Operations group that I used to belong to arrived there, and it was movie level shit. The one of the when they opened up the building, eventually a guy walked out of there in full uniform, municipal police uniform,
Yeah.
saying that he got in through the back, and everybody was looking at each other. The fuck? Get down on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Down on the ground.
Oh,
Inside, it was a house of horrors, situation.
jeez.
But there's the example of how nobody's to be trusted.
Yeah.
They disarmed the whole municipal police force in Tijuana once, and as a protest, all the police officers there would carry around a slingshot in their back pocket.
Mm.
And basically, Tijuana didn't have a police force for a few weeks.
Right.
Some of us were tasked specific regions of Tijuana to patrol with the military, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So some of my guys were fucking quasi governors of parts of Tijuana for a few days, which was pretty
Jesus
fucking
Christ.
insane.
What kind of threats did you actually personally encounter?
What kind of what threats?
Threats, yeah.
Like, I mean, I've lived in military bases. I had to live in hotels and houses we would rent, so I couldn't be in one place for too long. As far as me living
And
independently.
is there like, doing the fact that obviously you're quite high profile now and you talk quite a lot about the situation within Mexico, so has that made you even more of a target? And have you, like, no,
I mean, realistically, I don't talk about anything that isn't quite known
isn't in
anymore.
the open? Yeah, yeah, okay,
A lot of the people that I used to work with, the group that I used to work with doesn't exist anymore.
okay.
It was defunded, defunct, and a lot of the people didn't. A lot of people that worked for that group, with a lot of the training that I had, with a lot more of the experiences that I had, a lot of those guys are now working elsewhere, and it's not just
Elsewhere
me.
for the cartel or elsewhere?
Elsewhere, probably.
Yeah,
So, as far as me talking about some of these things publicly and being kind of like weary about some of this stuff, of course,
uh-huh, uh-huh.
um, it is weird stuff to talk about. It's dangerous stuff to kind of approach at times, but I realistically don't speak about anything that isn't out in the open in a lot of
Sure,
ways.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't talk about anybody specifically, and I don't take any of it personally. So
yeah, yeah.
I did my time. I didn't play for any team. I got out after 12 years, which is a lot. People think it's only 12 years. Yeah, only 12. Yeah, only 12 years.
It's a long,
Uh,
it's a long time when you're in the crosshairs of those people, right?
yeah, it's an unwinnable. It's an unwinnable war. It's an unwinnable situation down there. You come to a time where you just figure out, there's I remember seeing a drone drop a grenade onto the head of public safety in Baja. Just seeing that, and then researching a few things about an IED factory that was found in Guadalajara,
Yeah, yeah.
and another interesting Irish connection. The IEDs, most of the IED constructions and the homemade mortar constructions were purely fucking IRA,
Really,
stuff.
really.
Yeah,
Because,
IRA stuff. That
because
that that.
sorry, no,
So
because sorry to interrupt you.
so the IRA apparently sent people to Colombia to train the FARC,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and
That's what I was gonna say. That's what I was gonna say.
some of those people with that knowledge base went to Mexico and are now showing some of that stuff.
Wow.
The troubles and the Irish IRA methodology and stuff like that. Something that we actually studied that a lot when we are going through training.
Really? Yeah.
As far as one of the as far as one of the, the modern conflicts to look at, to figure out things, we learn more about the troubles, and as far as what, how they approach that problem, and how everybody's doing their thing.
Hmm.
I think we got more learning from that experience than Iraq or Afghanistan or other instructors that come in with
Yeah.
different there's different experiences. Like that's it's an interesting conflict to kind of
Super
study.
interesting. Yeah, and I suppose it's kind of when you're dealing with the troubles that were happening in Ireland in the 70s and the 80s and whatever, you're talking about, it's obviously urban warfare, which is going to be much more similar to what's going on in Mexico than if you're out in the middle of it. Like obviously it might be different if you're in Baghdad or somewhere like that, but if you're in the middle of some fucking field in Afghanistan, it's not really, you know.
Yeah, and their interconnectivity with other groups, their ability to source things, their ability to make things, their craftiness, the fucking wanton leaps in urban warfare that they did, and that actually influences current schools of urban warfare that even like the U.S. Special Forces does, and indoctrinates some of their guys in things that are purely sourced from IRA fucking methodologies. It's interesting to see how some of that influence, when I started seeing that some of that stuff pop up in Mexico, during the end of my career,
Uh-huh.
I realized that the arms race was beyond the arms race that we were. It wasn't an arms race for us. The cartels were, were beyond anything that the group that I was working with or the government that was behind us had
Yeah,
in its repertoire. I mean, we were getting, you know, more training and more rifles and more newer vehicles, and we are doing the same jobs that we were doing for 12 years, and nothing was changing, and everything was getting worse. And those guys had their own cell phone networks. They had their own, GPS technology situations going on as far as how they track their loads. They had a bunch of, quantum leaps in technology and resources, and I just realized it's not winnable. You come
oh,
to a moment where it's not winnable, and then you see your new boss is a sympathizer with you know
yeah,
one of the
yeah,
sides. So
yeah.
you know what,
Get the fuck out.
get the fuck out and travel and move.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
been I've been on the road for 3 years.
Okay, gotcha.
Literally been 3 years on the road, so I try and keep myself mobile.
Keep
You know.
one person I wanted to ask you about, Ed, was I I read, I did a bit of research on this remarkable lady called Miriam Rodriguez. Are you familiar with who that is?
You have to
So,
refresh me.
sure. So Miriam Rodriguez was somebody who her daughter was kidnapped by the, was it Los Zetas? And
Yeah, yeah, Los Zetas, and she was one of the. Her story, if it's who I think it is, yeah, her story is not at all rare.
yeah, so she was kidnapped by Los Zetas, and basically she was held for ransom. And basically what so her parents were asked for 50,000 US dollars. So the parents had to beg, steal, and borrow to get that money. They got that money and they paid the ransom. And their father went to collect his daughter from outside a cemetery. I believe it was, I can't remember where it was, but basically he went to collect her and he was told his daughter was going to be there. The daughter wasn't there. And then basically the mother went on this fucking, like, like the maternal instinct kicked in, and she went on, I'm not stopping at anything, to go, and basically she tracked down, I think she kept going and kept putting pressure on the Mexican government and the police force, and she had, I think, 10 or 12 people imprisoned, and then there was a prison break and a load of these dudes got out, and then they went after her, and she ended up getting riddled with 13 bullets or something outside when she was getting into her car. But fucking hell.
That's the story of many people. Farmers that fought for their lands against the cartels with hunting rifles and took out a few dudes, and
Yeah.
eventually got swarmed. Uh, Mormon communities arming themselves during, the mid 2000s, trying to defend themselves from incoming cartels and being very successful at it.
Yeah.
And then in the army being kind of pissed off that they were illegally smuggling guns from places and maybe storing guns that they shouldn't have.
Yeah.
uh, the whole situation in Mexico is dire. The government isn't on the side of the people. It used to be that the army was the incorruptible Mexican army, and there was like the bastion of hope and trust, and that hasn't been the case.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not recently. And we then there's the case of the 48 students that were
On the
went missing.
bus. Yeah, on the bus. Yeah, yeah.
And now it turns out there's a bunch of arrest warrants for members of the military that covered it up and probably shot up that whole bus and made the bodies disappear.
What? Why? Like, what would have the motive for them to do that to those kids be?
Uh, so these kids were part of a university called it's basically they're basically university kids, students from some of the rural communities that have a very leftist inclinations as far as their political views, and they get used as porros a lot. Porros basically means agitators. They would go to Mexico City and set a protest. Some theories say that they were stopped for this reason, and when they were stopped, a fight broke out in the bus. Started getting rowdy, and a few of the agents got nervous and shot up the whole bus. In
Jesus.
an attempt to cover the whole thing up, they were taken to an army barracks where the remaining students that were still injured and or dying and or not injured and dying were all executed.
Jesus. Jesus. I, I,
And
I,
that's the Mexican army. And if people doubt this, there are arrest warrants for a lot of these people right now after some of these investigations kind of came out. But that was the bastion of hope and trust, and some people still believe that. There's some people out there that have bought that blue pill. And I don't know. I don't see a lot of I don't see a lot of institutions down there remaining that you can
yeah,
trust.
yeah. I've got two more main questions because you're not under pressure for time, are you? Or
I'm almost. Yeah. I have about 15 minutes.
15 minutes. Yeah, no, yeah. That's no problem. So basically, my first question was in terms of the dynamic between okay, so obviously we've seen the shift in terms of what happened when it used to be the Colombian cartels, the Medellin cartel, and all these big cartels down there. Now I know that there's still cartels operating out of Colombia, and a lot of them do business in transporting, obviously getting the coke to the Mexican cartels, but also transferring coke over to Europe as well,
Yeah.
which is a main corridor from the ports in Colombia. But what's the dynamic like between the Mexican cartels and the Colombian cartels? Is it a case that they're in partnership with each other? Are they competing with each other?
It's a partnership. It's a
Okay.
partnership. It's Some of these partnerships are actually linked through blood ties now. Like some Colombian men marrying Mexican daughters of certain
Really?
peoples, and the influence. Some of these ties stem back from alliances and relationships that all the way to Escobar. Some of these people have been around. They say that they say that El Chapo Guzman met Escobar. So some of these things, some of these relationships are long lasting.
Yeah.
Now, it's the problem with the Colombian cartel is that it lost its ability to project.
Mm-hmm.
By this I mean their influences in their production and packaging, but as far as projecting, I think that's where they waned in influence and power, or they just shifted focus from it to there's more players out there now that dedicate themselves to opening up markets or shit or transporting things through Mexico or through the ocean, or going to Europe to places like Northern Africa, where some of the stuff gets unloaded and then repackaged in different things, and then makes its way to Europe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, you see more of a they're more of a regional player now. Mexican cartels are transnational. You know, there's a video of a former cartel hitman that was recently killed last year, El Chino Antrax. He was a member of a legendary hit squad from the Sinaloa cartel.
Uh-huh.
There's videos of him rolling in a Ferrari down like in Paris, you know, just fucking. That was like it's a symbol of how transnational and just no fucks
Yeah,
given they were,
yeah,
and they are, you know. If they want you, they can get you
yeah,
in far off places.
yeah.
So their
Because
ability to project.
yeah, they'd be like I think the thing that makes the Mexican cartels fairly unique is okay, obviously their proximity to being on the border to the United States, that makes them in a very advantageous position. But obviously they've got the relationships with the Colombian cartels, but also let's say like when the Colombians got the cocaine into the United States back in the 70s and 80s and whatever, they didn't have the foot soldiers on the ground in there. Whereas the Colombian cartels, the Mexican cartels, excuse me, there's so many Mexicans living in the United States, and there's so many Mexican gangs and that they can fucking create this. They've got this little ready-made network to distribute all throughout the United States.
That's one part of it, but realistically, they actually utilize uh, motorcycle gangs to distribute. They utilize black street gangs in places like Chicago to
Yeah,
distribute for them. Uh, they have the ability to enforce their distribution rights in the places where they distribute. So, what I mean by that is, there's you can't talk shit about them, or you can't mess with their interest in certain parts of the United States, or they'll fucking get you. And it doesn't matter who you are. There's cases of sheriffs being, targeted out there, and if people out there doubt that, the interest in some of these transnational organizations can muster up a group of 70 people to go after you somewhere,
yeah,
doesn't matter where you are.
yeah,
Th- th- this is doable.
yeah.
Again, when I talk about their ability to project, they project not only an influence in distribution of drugs, but also business and finances, property, families of theirs that they've supported, as far as paying for immigration processes, paying
Yeah,
for careers. They have lawyers, they have doctors, they have people setting up hospitals. I mean, I had this surreal moment once of driving on a freeway in Sinaloa that was great, and all of a sudden it started getting shitty. And I was like, wow, what the fuck happened to the road? Oh, this is the government side of the road. That one was built by the cartels. So that's how fucking, you're like,
oh
okay,
man, yeah.
okay, this is the reality, right?
Yeah, yeah. Last question to finish on. One thing I heard you saying on the last time you were on Joe Rogan was you were saying you were predicting within 5 years that the American soldiers would have feet on the ground, that there'd be a military presence in Mexico from the United States because this situation, for a few reasons, obviously, some of it due to resources within Mexico, and some of it due to obviously the war on drugs, which is this fucking war which has been going on and there's no progress been made.
uh I still am on the within the next, four, and I said 5 years back then because that's the term limit of the Mexican president. He
Uh-huh.
still has 3 years to go,
Uh-huh.
a little less. Uh, I'm still on that. I'm still putting my bets on some sort of event happening at the border that will make it a necessity for the U.S. to put boots on the ground in Mexico,
Yeah.
and it's going to be related to resources. I can kind of bet on, but maybe wrong. Who knows? All I know is that, things are getting worse, not better.
Yeah.
Americans, through their taxpayers and myself, because I pay taxes now as well, have been funding the drug war in Mexico for years, and nothing is getting better. Nothing is getting better as far as corruption. Nothing's getting better as far as strategies. More people are murdered, more people are disappearing, more drugs are getting into the US, and everything's worse.
Wow.
So if you're paying your taxes and if you have a public representative, fucking get on the phone with them, man. This something is broken. It's not working. This fucking drug war is a fucking sham.
Yeah.
Um, something needs to change. And you know, if you don't turn on politics, politics will turn on you. And this shit isn't a Mexican problem. It's a regional problem, and it stopped being a Mexican problem long ago. It's delusional to think that a wall is going to stop it. You know.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Okay, listen, Ed, you are I literally, mate. I could talk to you. I could talk to you all year, so I could. But when are you coming to Dublin? Because we're going out for a few drinks when you do. Yeah.
That is actually 2022 rolls around. I actually am planning a trip out there. So okay,
Hey,
yeah.
hey, listen, stay in touch, and 100%, we'll go out for a few beers, and it'd be my pleasure.
I'll bring the sombrero and the donkey show stories.
and the Don Julio as well, yeah.
Yeah, another long bottle.
My man, my man. Okay, listen, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you, and best of luck with everything, and stay in touch, yeah?
Oh, well.
Thank you so much. See you later, Ed. Thanks. Bye-bye.